WOVU LP, Cleveland.
This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. In-depth conversations with people who are making a difference in the lives of others here and around the world. Culture is at the heart of who you are. Know your culture, find yourself on Open Door with Vince Robinson.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Open Door. My guest this morning is playwright Michael Oatman. He is a former playwright-in-residence at Karamu Theater, the oldest African American theater in the country. He's only the second person to hold that honor in the storied history of Karamu, the first being Langston Hughes. In 2011, Michael won the CPAC Workforce Fellowship and the Cleveland Art Prize in 2010 for his Best Emerging Artist Award and the 2010 Lantern Award for Best Play. A number of his plays have been produced in various venues in Cleveland, where he is also frequently called on to direct both new and classic plays by playwrights. The Cleveland-born playwright and director has made his mark in his hometown and across the nation, and his poetic yet provocative work has been featured locally at the Cleveland Play House FusionFest, Cleveland Public Theater, Karamu House, Cleveland State University, and the Ingenuity Festival. Nationally, Michael has had productions and readings at the Stella Adler Conservatory in New York City, the African American Playwright Exchange in Washington, D.C., the Shelterbelt Theatre in Omaha, Nebraska, and the ETA Theatre in Chicago, Illinois. There's so much more that I could share with you about his bio, but I'm going to let him share some of those extras for you. At this time, it's my pleasure to welcome to Open Door with Vince Robinson, playwright and director, Michael Oatman. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Hey, what's good, Vince, man? Good to see you. Good to hear you.
Yeah, good to be heard, and look forward to seeing you sometime in the near future. We haven't seen each other for a few years, and we can blame the Rona for that, but seems like things are opening up, so perhaps someday soon we'll be able to lay eyes on each other. So I'll just start by asking you what you've been up to lately.
I just had a play that opened here in town in December called King of Cave Street, which was a real labor of love, particularly because it was set in East Cleveland and told a sort of uniquely East Cleveland story. So I really enjoyed bringing that to town. I premiered it in Dallas maybe 4 or 5 years ago, so being able to do the regional premiere of that play at Playwrights Local was a real highlight of my career.
Yeah, so tell us about Playwrights Local, because I know a lot of people roll through there. I know your compatriot, Terrence Spivey, you don't see him as competition. I'm sure you guys are brothers in the genre. Tell us about that institution.
Yeah, it's a wonderful theater that's dedicated almost solely and single-mindedly to promoting and producing local playwrights here in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. And I love being there. I love being able to work there. They gave me a chance to do my regional premiere, and I'm actually doing another piece for them. I'm directing a play for them by Dr. Mary Weems called Hey Siri, coming up in July.
Yes, Hey Siri. I had a chance to talk to her about that, and I think they may have shown that at Obama sometime within the past year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was a reading there.
It was a reading, but you're going to take it to the next level.
Yeah, we're going to do a production at the Borderlight Festival in the end of July.
Okay. Yeah, it has been really fascinating to connect with folks like you and Terrence and Mary Weems, and I'd like to get your perspective on the whole idea of playwriting and the power that it has to affect the lives of people. What drew you to writing plays?
It was almost an accident. When I went into my master's program at the NEO MFA, I went in as a novelist. But when I was down at Cleveland State, I got approached by one of the people who was running the theater there because they needed a little bit of diversity. So they asked me to write a play. And since I had taken a playwriting course a few years before that, I said, why not? I wrote a play and put it up, and it was fairly well received. And the next thing I know, somebody had called me who had saw that play and wanted me to write another play. That they had a project that they were doing. Then somebody saw that. And the next thing I know, I was writing another play for a project downtown. The next thing I know, 6 plays in, I guess I'm a playwright.
Wow. So you talked about being a novelist and you somehow segued into being a playwright. What's the difference between writing a novel and writing a play?
Well, I can get into a lot of the structural differences, but for the most part, a storyteller is a storyteller. The only real difference I find between a novelist and a playwright is that when you're writing a novel, you're basically writing an artifact. You're writing this thing that does not change and is self-contained within you, the writer. You may have an editor that you work with here or there, but for the most part, it's a solo process. Playwriting is a group thing. You have to not only write for yourself, but you have to leave enough room for other artists to find themselves in your work. You got to leave enough room for an actor to interpret it, for a director to interpret it, for a lighting designer to be able to create. You know, as a playwright, you are creating the springboard for other artists to create their art. Novels aren't so much like that. For a novel, the product is the product. You know, you're not trying to launch other artists from that platform.
Mm-hmm. I also would imagine that it places a different, I don't want to call it a burden, but it's a different experience for a person who is receiving it. When someone is reading a book or reading your novel, they have to use their imagination to create the scenery that they're seeing. But then when you are doing a play, you may have a set that brings certain elements to life, and then the people who are on stage are also bringing those characters to life.
Yeah, that's very true. That's a very true statement, man.
Yes. So what's the experience like for you to be not only the playwright, but the director?
It has its pluses and its minuses. Sometimes there's nothing more wonderful than handing a director your play to see what they bring to it, to see what they see in it. Sometimes someone who has more distance from your work will see things in it that even you are too close to see. So sometimes I love it when I get some wild director who has this wild idea and they take my piece and turn it into something I could have never imagined. That's a wonderful process sometimes.
Can you think of one of those experiences that you could share with us?
I once had a kid who wanted to do one of my plays in the festival, and he wanted to put puppets in it, which I thought was utterly ridiculous. But he wanted to do like this gritty street drama, but he wanted to do it with puppets.
And how did it work?
Oh, it was another disaster. But I love the fact that this young kid believed in it. I mean, went to the wall with it. I mean, it was horrible. But I love that he swung for the fences, and that he took his shot. Because in this game, sometimes you swing for the fences, and sometimes you miss. Yeah. But a miss is not a reason not to keep swinging for the fences, and that's what I try to imbue in my students. Keep swinging for the fences. Okay. And if you miss.
Well, you know, while we have this conversation, I'm just reflecting on one of the only plays that I've ever been involved in, and it was at the Ensemble Theater, and it was a 2-person play. It was me and this actress and singer named Molly McFadden, and the play was about her and her mother and their relationship to Alzheimer's. So the way she depicted her mother was as a puppet. So I was interacting as an actor with an actress who was using a puppet as a character, and believe it or not, it did work.
I love it. I love it.
And the other thing that was so phenomenal about that situation was that within that play, I was also a musician. So I was playing piano. I was playing music for her as she was singing. So there are a couple of singing numbers in the play. But the puppet can work. It's just that in that situation, it didn't work.
Well, who's the director?
Oh, Christina Courtenay.
Indeed.
Yeah. And, it was my first time being directed. It was my first time having, acting roles, because usually, me with my voice, I always end up being the narrator. So I never really had that acting experience.
You have that radio voice.
Right. Well, I mean, that's how I got my start in radio, so it was only natural. But yeah, and I did a stage reading with Terrence Spivey. It was Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. So I was on stage with Peter Lawson Jones and Mansfield Frazier and a bunch of other folks.
Guys, now you're talking about my guys.
Yes. Yeah. So on the flip side, tell us about an experience that you had where somebody took your play and they took it to the next level as a director, if you can think of one.
Sure. I did a piece called Not a Uterus in Sight. And it was a play about about a FBI agent who arrested this male professor who was giving sort of a really defiant pro-choice speech, but that speech ended up inciting a riot. And it was a riot that killed people, because what had happened was in the play, the Supreme Court had reversed Roe v. Wade. And so all of these states had started passing these very restrictive abortion laws or outlawing abortion outright. And so this professor was speaking against this and caused a riot that caused the death of police officers. So the play takes place in the interrogation room between an African American FBI agent and the white male professor. And it was a decent play, but then I gave it to a guy named Claude File, who used to run the theater down at CSU. And Claude made one simple change that is so obvious that, I kicked myself for missing it. He took the professor and made the professor a woman. And the second he did that, the entire play opened up. I mean, it exploded with passion. Once it was a black man talking to a white woman. Just that change created an entirely new dynamic that I was too close to see. And it was a fabulous piece because of it.
Okay. Well, speaking of those dynamics, I have something in mind that I want to talk to you about when we come back. And I think most will agree when we talk about it. It's going to blow folks' mind. You're listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU. My guest is former playwright in residence at Karamu Theater. He is also a director of theatrical productions. His name is Michael Oatman. He's got a story to tell, and we're going to hear it when we come back. We'll be right back.
Cleveland, we know you have something to say. We know there are things on your mind you've been itching to get out. Call the WOVU Talkback line, 216-200-7848, and tell us what it's all about. Tell us what's bothering you. Tell us what makes you happy. Tell us what you want to hear on WOVU. Call or text the WOVU Talkback line, 216-200-7848. This is WOVU, our voices united. We can't do what we do without you.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest this morning is playwright and director Michael Oatman, and he was just telling us about a play that he was involved in where a director took it to the next level by switching the characters up and making a character that was a man into a woman, something like that. I'm thinking of a play that you did sometime within the past 10 years or so, where the character was always perceived as a black man, but you decided to flip the script and make that person a white man. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Oh, yeah, Mountaintop.
Yes. Tell us about that.
It got me into a little bit of trouble. I was doing a piece that was featuring a character that was Martin Luther King right before his death. And we had a white actor play the character. And it kind of set the world on fire when I did that. A lot of people got really, really upset. Mm-hmm. And what happened was we initially, what the idea was we were going to do it normally with a black Martin Luther King, and we were going to have a day or two where a white actor came in and played the role. to see sort of the difference between the two, to explore sort of this issue of ownership. I always wondered why is race the only lines by which we can have ownership in a character. And at the time, I was teaching out at Kent, which I'm still teaching out there, and we were exploring some of these questions in my playwriting class. And so I made the shift, but what ended up happening is we weren't able to get a black Martin Luther King through the process. We lost like 6 or 7 Martin Luther Kings for various reasons. And so we ended up at the end of the process, all we had was a white Martin Luther King. So the question was, do we shut down or do we go forward and do the play? I said, let's go forward and do the play. And the whole world caught on fire.
So what was the play like?
It was good. The actor was outstanding.
Yeah. And how was it received by the audiences?
It was interesting. The audiences that actually saw it, I remember there were some students who were protesting outside, some black students. So I went out and I said, if you guys want to protest, why don't you do it in the theater? Come watch the show. And so we gave them free tickets and let them come in and watch the show. They were very angry. And after the show, they came up to me. One of the guys came up to me and said, you was way out of line for what you did here. And what you did was wrong. And you disrespected Martin Luther King. And you created an erasure of that historical figure. But I ain't gonna lie, that white boy was good.
That's interesting. But, I think it's really kind of a teachable moment for folks, because sometimes the best way to understand somebody's experience is to put their shoes on. And
yeah.
So, I wonder what the actor's thought was after he played that role. Did it change his perspective on Dr. King? Did you have any conversations with him about the impact of that performance on him?
The actor was obsessed with the character. He truly believed that Martin Luther King changed his life. And so, he had such a deep commitment to the piece. He really, his name was Robert Branch. He really believed in it. And he believed that in most ways that are important, he is as much a child of Martin Luther King as anybody. He's a late 40s, early 50s man, born in America after the Civil Rights Movement, which revolutionized this country. And his thing is, I'm as much a child of that legacy as anybody else. Mm-hmm. Martin Luther King was not just a civil rights leader. He was an American icon. He was a world icon.
Yes.
And so his belief was, I have as much right as an American to his legacy as anybody else. He's one of the greatest Americans to ever live. And as an American, why can't I have ownership in that too? It was kind of the question.
Yeah. Well, I'm also thinking about the play Day of Absence, which I was privileged to not only see at Karamu, but to also shoot it. And there weren't white folks outside protesting that black people were playing white people.
Wonderful play by the day. It was wonderful production.
Yeah. I have a good friend. I'm not going to mention his name today, but we actually had conversation about what it would be like to do a movie like that. And I don't want to give the idea away, so I'm going to stop right there. But, I'm just trying to imagine an America that does not have any black people in it and what America would look like if it was like that. I know we've been ignored, but what if in fact we weren't here? What would this country be without all the contributions that have been made by people of African descent in this country?
And the answer is it can't exist. There is no America as we know America without black people.
Yes.
It just doesn't exist without us. It just doesn't.
Yeah. The other thing is just a footnote. Dr. King has a really special place in my life because it was on my 11th birthday that he was assassinated.
Wow.
So that's a day that I will never, ever forget. I was young at the time, but I had a certain sense of remorse because I knew something significant had happened on that day. And so every April 4th, I remember it was really a profound day. But kudos to you for having the courage to do that. And has the storm blown over? Have people forgiven you for the blasphemous act of portraying Dr. King as a white man?
Some have, some haven't. I'm still not welcome in certain theaters. I got fired from a lot of places. There were a lot of places that would not go near me. There were some friendships that were lost. People who were really, really upset and felt, really betrayed and angry.
Well, it's a shame that they don't really understand the background of how it happened, why it happened, and why it was a good thing instead of being the bad thing that people have characterized it. But, life happens, and we have to grow from things that happen, and we have to evolve. And, some folks just don't. So
the way I think about art, and the only people that I feel weird about are the people who didn't see the show. Now, if you saw the show and felt some kind of way about it, I got no problem with that. To me, as a provocateur, I don't mind it if you're provoked. That's what we were doing. We were trying to provoke something. We always try to provoke laughter, provoke joy, provoke thought. So I leave that space for the audience. The only time it got weird was when we had people who had not seen the show, who were making definitive comments about a show they had never seen. That was weird.
Yes. Well, context is really important,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And we lose that because we live in this soundbite era, and people focus on a very small portion of a larger situation. And because they're so stuck in that and they don't understand the relationship of that to everything else, they really lose perspective on it, and so they end up demonizing someone or something that should not be demonized. But again,
I agree. I totally agree. It's just such an odd argument. Like even in other things, like I've heard people say, "Man, I hate Tyler Perry. His work is awful. He's a shame." And so I said, "Well, have you seen any Tyler Perry plays? I don't watch that crap." I'm like, well, how can you make that definitive a statement about a piece of art you've never seen? Like that? It's weird to me. It's always strange to me.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that Tyler Perry's skin is thick enough that those kinds of comments don't affect him. And the other thing is he's counting his coins, so I'm sure he probably doesn't care what they have to say.
What I love about Tyler Perry, the one thing I like about him is that as much coins as he has, and I've seen him talk about this, he does care. You know why? Because he's an artist. Underneath all the billionaire and all of the big business that he's doing, he's an artist. And he cares about his work. And I've seen him talk about Spike Lee and some of the comments that are made. And I like that it bothers him. Because he's an artist. And I respect that about him, that it still bothers him. He can sit up in his mansion and fly there in his jet. But in the end, he's no different than me and you, Vince. He's an artist.
Yeah. Well, one of the criticisms of Tyler Perry, and this might be a little bit off topic, but it was just his need to write everything and not depend on other writers. And some other writers, as he's brought in, have had issues with him. But I was just wondering what you think about having to hand over artistic license to others in that process.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's easy for me to say. It's an easy comment to make that I think he should bring in other writers and this and that. But, I don't know. It's hard for me to tell a man how to bake his bread. It's one of those things where, it's hard for me to tell another artist how to be an artist.
Yes.
I think if I were in that place, I probably would, because I tend to be a delegator and I tend to bring other people in and bring other people out. I'm one of those people that I am far less concerned with how successful you are as an artist. I'm much more impressed by what is your tree. Who are the people you brought up who are now working as artists? Who are the people that you trained? Who are the people that you taught? And that's the teacher in me. Who have you taught and opened the door for who's now out there kicking the world's tail? That's impressive to me. Who is your tree? If you're just a success but you don't have a tree, then I don't know what to do with that. The thing that I like about Tyler Perry is that he has a whole roster of actors that he employs and puts to work that are black actors that people had left for dead. Nobody was talking about Lou Gossett Jr. You know what I mean? He put that guy and gave him roles in plays. Nobody was talking about Maya Angelou. Nobody was talking about Cicely Tyson. Nobody was talking about Felicia Rashad and giving these fine, amazing black actors roles. but Tyler Perry was. Some of the same people out here who taking shots at him and this and that. Did you call up Cicely Tyson when she was in her 80s and give her a writer a role? Or Maya Angelou or Lou Gossett? I like that. I respect that he's got a real history of bringing up black artists, especially ones who were great artists who have been forgotten, literally left for dead. I admire that.
Are there any folks in your tree that you want to shout out right now?
Oh, man, I got so many at this point. Vince, I'm starting to get so old. But I can shout out people like Christina Johnson, who's a fine, amazing artist. She's doing Color Purple right now. She's directed some stuff for me. I got Crystal Christian, who's directed some stuff for me. Stacey Malone, who just started her own studio. She's directed some stuff for me, done some plays and stuff for me. I can shout out the women of Handmade Films, which is a company I do in which we train African American female directors to direct films. And sometimes they're new filmmakers that have never done anything in their life. And one of the people that helps that come to life for me is Paula Washington, who just does amazing work in this space, helping me to produce these pieces. And she's also a director as well. Crystal Panther, she just did a piece for Handmade Films, which is going to just be phenomenal, called Benediction. She directed it, and she just killed it.
Okay, well, okay. Let's talk about Handmade Films when we come back, and you can give me some more on that, because I'm sure it's something that folks want to hear about. You're listening to Open Door on 95.9 FM WOVU. My guest is playwright and director Michael Oatman. We'll be right back after this.
Since 1997, St. Luke's Foundation has awarded millions of dollars each year to positive, impactful organizations that serve you and your community. And now it's time to put the money where your mouth is. So we're introducing Lift Every Voice, a platform created to hear directly from you. We want to know what's important to you and what's important for your community, so St. Luke's Foundation can put all these millions in all the right places. And sharing your voice is easy to do. Go to lev216.org and sign up for the Lift Every Voice email and text updates. It's completely anonymous and totally free, and your voice will impact where, why, and how St. Luke's Foundation spreads that monetary love. Head over to lev216.org and sign up now to help lift every voice in our community. This message is brought to you by St. Luke's Foundation and WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United, a Burton Bell Carr community radio station.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest this morning is Michael Oatman, playwright, director. He was actually the second person to hold the honor of Playwright-In-Residence at Cleveland's famed, it's Karamu, but everybody pronounces it Karamu. I guess it's maybe the Clevelandization of that name, but it's a Swahili word that I think it means a place for joyful gathering, and that it is. Before we took this break, you were telling us about Handmade Films and your relationship to that, and you got some projects that you're working on, so I wanted to make sure that we mentioned that. Give us the background on Handmade Films and the folks that you're working with.
Yeah, it started when I was in theater. I sort of noticed that black women really are the backbone of sort of black theater in terms of the patrons, in terms of a lot of the staff. You know, if you take out black women from black theater, there is no black theater. And I just thought it was odd that we didn't see a lot of black women in the director's chair. And I thought, well, maybe just black women don't want to direct. You know, maybe it's not something that they're into. But then when I started talking to black women, I found that wasn't true. So as a playwright, I sort of went out of my way. And as a producer, I went out of my way to create spaces for black women to have opportunities to direct. And so what happened when the pandemic came, I essentially took that same ethos and switched it over to film. Because film was easier to do during the pandemic. You know, you didn't need a crowd for that. You could do it with a small, crew that was vaccinated, such and so on. And so we just started making films at Handmade Films. And I decided that I made this deal with myself that I wasn't going to let money be a barrier. I wasn't going to let funding be a barrier. I was just going to grab a camera, go out in these streets, take a script, grab a director, and we were just going to make some films. And the whole point of Handmade Films is you cannot be a filmmaker unless you make films. We don't do no mixers. We don't do no fundraisers. We don't do any stage readings. We make films. That's what we do. Because if you ain't making film, then what are you doing? With all due respect, I've gone to some of these other filmmaking organizations, and I just noticed ain't nobody making no films. And I don't know how you become a filmmaker unless you make films. So we make short films. You know, as much as we can afford and as much as we can beg, borrow, and steal, we go out here and we shoot films. And we've been around barely a year, and I think we're on our 9th film.
Wow. I've seen you toting a camera around every once in a while. Are you using DSLRs to do your films, or are you going to the more extravagant route and getting some of the higher price models? Right now we've shot with a Blackmagic film camera. We've shot with my Canon 5D, and my partner, who does the majority of our shooting, he uses one of those mirrorless Canon cameras to shoot, which is DSLR. Okay. Yeah. I actually shoot Canon. Well, I have shot Canon, but I kind of migrated over to Sony, and I really like the Sony cameras that I'm using. They're both mirrorless cameras. As a matter of fact, I have 3 mirrorless cameras, and I have this idea of also getting into filmmaking as well. I have a few ideas, and I've got plenty of footage. I mean, I've got footage that I could actually do documentaries right now, but you know, you get pulled in so many different directions. But I'm glad to see you into the filmmaking idea. Are you're planning to do even more, or maybe extend the length of some of the films that you're working on?
Yeah, we kept getting longer and longer. Benediction, which was the last film, because everything we were making was 10 minutes or shorter. We just did Benediction, which was our longest film, at about 17 to 18 minutes. And we got another one coming up that's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30.
Mm-hmm. So when you do your theatrical productions, they're generally 1, 2, maybe 3 acts, and it's a much more immersive experience in terms of the time span. How do you adjust from doing that feature length type situation to doing the shorter stuff?
Yeah, I mean, they're just different animals. I mean, you know, they're just different animals. I mean, ultimately it's all storytelling. I mean, it's always some different form of storytelling. With some of the shorter stuff, we've learned to kind of accept what we have and move on. You know, because sometimes you get a short piece, man, you could spend 20 years editing that thing. But sometimes you have to be confident in what you've shot, cut it, put it in a can, and move on. For the longer stuff, we tend to take a little more time. There tends to be more issues that arise that we have to fix. But we are sort of equipped to do both. We just take time.
Okay. And what has been some of the subject matter of the films? You said you did 9 within 1 year. What were the films about?
One film was based on the tragedy that happened in Euclid about the little girl who was hit by a car. That film was called I'm On My Way. So we did a film about a woman who was racked with guilt, having struck a child on her way to work. One piece we did was about a woman walking through the neighborhood, but taking a metaphorical walk through her life and contemplating some of the decisions that she had made. One piece we made was called The Luckiest Girl in the World, about a woman who was in her later 30s, who was having a child and thought she was in the perfect relationship, and then she discovers that perhaps her husband is not who she thought he was. Benediction is about a shady underworld figure who has a very unexpected relationship with a pastor at a church. And we kind of find out what draws those two individuals together. One piece is called Whirlwind. It's about a mother who finds her daughter smoking marijuana. And the ironic part about it is when the mother was young, she was a hot girl. And when she finds her daughter smoking marijuana, she totally overreacts. And it's about her facing aging. It's a meditation on aging. So those are some of the subject matters that we've kind of dipped our toe into.
Yeah, they sound rather intriguing. How would someone go about finding these projects?
Right now, we're in the process of, and this is what we discovered, is that in order to enter some of the film festivals, you can't put them online publicly. So right now, we're in the process of submitting some of these works so that we can get them judged at film festivals. When we're done with that process, we're going to find a way to release it so people can see so the larger community can see the work.
Okay, so you've connected with the Greater Cleveland Urban Film Festival, I assume?
Yeah, it's one of the people that's definitely on our list. Right now we're going through Film Freeway and submitting to different places and picking out where we want to put which piece and why. But definitely we'll be submitting there.
Yes. Well, I'm happy to hear that. Like I said, they're intriguing, and I would really like to see what they look like and how they turned out. Are you gifted in terms of editing, or do you turn that over to someone else?
You know what I'm gifted at? I am gifted at saying, hey, that guy right there is a good editor. And that guy right there is a good editor. That's my gift.
Yeah, well, you said at the top that you were into delegation, so I'm not surprised to hear you say that. Some of us are so bent on controlling everything that we do everything, and there's an expense that comes along with that because you just have to do so much. So if you have the proclivity or the inclination to have others do it for you, then it can definitely work.
Yeah, I love my films too much to edit them.
So having to cut that part out, and you went through so much to get it, and to see it end up on the cutting room floor, it may not be a good feeling.
No, not that. It's just that I'm not a great editor. And so my films deserve good editing. And that means me not editing them. I am not a good editor. So I want my films to have the best editing that I can pull off or that I can facilitate. And that's not me.
Okay.
So I want to make sure that they have really good editing. We have certain quality controls that we use for Handmade, like the kind of sound we use. We don't use any sound out of the camera. It's nothing worse when I see a local film and then I can tell they're pulling the sound right off the camera. It has that tinny sound, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. We want to make sure that it has a certain quality level to it.
Yeah. Well, sound and lights, they're just so important. And, we live in this age where everybody has a camera on their phone, and they think if they shoot something, it makes them a filmmaker. But, yeah, you might be a filmmaker, but it's not going to be a film that everybody wants to watch, So.
Exactly. So we have quality control. I am proud to say we had a film crew come from Channel 5 to do a story on us. They did a story on Handmade films. And me and my DP, who also works as my quality control person, we got into a yelling, screaming fight right on because we were fighting over this lighting angle inside of a room. And we were going at it because on our set, it's about quality, and if we don't have that quality, we will clash over sometimes. There's that creative destruction. And I don't have people around me who are yes people. I got people around me that will stand up and say no. Now, it turns out in that argument, I was actually wrong. And he was right. But he was somebody that says this is not the quality that we need. We got to do better than this. And we did. And we did a film. It was basically a film about a Black Panther. It was a film directed by India Burton.
Okay. Different. Yeah, different from the film that she did because her film was a completely female cast.
Yeah, this was about Fred Hampton.
Okay.
We did a piece for Fred Hampton, and my DP really was strongly against a lighting setup that I wanted. That he was right. Once I saw it on film, it was terrible. But we went at it, and because he He's the guy who keeps the quality. He's the guy who tells me if the quality is off, and he'll stand up for that.
Was it because you had a theater lighting perspective, not a filmmaking lighting perspective? Could that have been the disconnect?
Well, it wasn't even a disconnect, but I am an Aries. Your birthday is the 4th, mine is the 6th. So I have a roaming spirit sometimes. So I am sometimes the guy who says, hey, let's take a shot at something new and weird. He's a tech guy. He's the guy that says, no, this is what we need, and I know what it looks like. Let's not go on a flight of fancy. So sometimes we'll bump heads on that stuff. And sometimes it's not a question of right or wrong. Sometimes I'm right and sometimes he's right. Sometimes it's somewhere in the middle. But we'll definitely stand our positions on things.
Yes. Well, I definitely know that Aries spirit, and we can be stubborn sometimes, but sometimes we have to get out of our own way in order for things to work.
But I have such a deep trust in him.
Yes.
That I was willing to say, okay, fine. Do it the way you want to do it, but it better be high.
All right.
And when he did it, he was 100% correct.
All right. Well, let's thank the creator for that. You're listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest this morning is Michael Oatman, playwright, director. We'll be back with more Open Door right after this on this Burton Bell Carr Community Radio Station, 95.9 FM, WOVU.
Why you go and listen to WOVU 95.9? Hey man, WOVU is that trending station, man. They got the best music in the area. They got the independent artists. They're all over Cleveland. They have something for everyone to listen to. Even the youth can dance to the rhythm of WOVU. Don't be a bumbleclot. Keep that dial locked to WOVU 95.9. The best station in the area. Check it.
Hi, this is Ken Hawkins.
Hi, this is Pinky.
This is T.C. Lewis.
This is Shantae Chappers.
This is Reggie Hayman.
This is Bill Silverby Richards. If you're not listening to WOVU 95.9 FM, you're not in the mix. I'm Silverby. Crank it up.
24 hours of golden.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest this morning again is Michael Oatman, playwright and director. He's given us some insight on the filmmaking process and how important it is to accept someone's opinion about how something should be lit, especially when you're wrong. Let's shift gears and just talk a little bit about your history. You are one of the few folks to receive the CPAC Workforce Fellowship Award and the Cleveland Art Prize. Back in 2010 and 2011, I have been involved in work about the transformation of individual artist funding here in Cleveland, and I'm very well aware of what happened as a result of that. But since you were fortunate enough to receive one of these awards, can you share with us what impact that had on your life and your career as a playwright?
Well, the first thing that it did for me, oddly enough, it helped me buy a house. Because I was able to stabilize my finances with that money, I had some money left over to buy my condo. And by doing that, and I tell this to artists all the time, if you can find a way to become stable, it makes a lot of your art a lot more possible when you're not running from Peter to pay Paul all the time. And so the first thing that award did is it helped to stabilize me. So I'm always appreciative of that. It kind of gave me almost a middle-class upbringing type style. I wasn't sweating so much. It gave me a little lee room to actually create. And since from that point on, I've been in, a pretty good place to create art. So I was appreciative of it for that reason.
Yeah, and the point that I have been making about that, because the transformation of that program has resulted in artists receiving much smaller grants.
Yeah, I saw that.
And what I say about that is that You give somebody $15,000-$20,000, they can create an institution.
Absolutely.
You give somebody $2,500, $5,000, it might help them pay the rent. They might be able to buy a few brushes or buy a lens or buy some paint or whatever. I don't know that it makes that much of a difference in their life, except for, you know, it's a nice blessing. It's a nice gift. You do what you do with it. But, you know, that's one of the criticisms that I have about the transformation of this process. And I'm probably saying too much right now, but it's been on my mind.
It changed my life. I was able to found a theater down in Garden Valley. At the time, it was the New African Theater. I founded that. We did a bunch of shows down there. We did a bunch of work. I was able to it helped to buy my condo. By paying other bills, it freed me up to pursue buying a condo. I ended up buying a condo, which I still live in. Once I did that, once I took care of that major bill in my life, I didn't have to deal with housing. I was able to do a lot more creative stuff in the community. I didn't always have to worry about picking up a check in the community because I knew my housing was taken care of. So it made me a lot more connected to the community because I wasn't trying to rob Peter to pay Paul all the time. Yes. You know, I'm a very community-based person. So it was nice that I could go work with people and I didn't have to get a check from it. I could just go and create and be a part of the community like what we did in East Cleveland, where I did a photo project where we went around East Cleveland. We took a picture of all the positive things that exist in East Cleveland. I was able to do that project because I didn't need to make money off of it. My rent is already paid. My car note is $119. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I don't have to make that kind of money to eat. I can go and I can pour into the community. And I think that's the one thing that's missing from those grants now. That money is okay, but it can't really change your life. You can't really invest back in the community like you could before. Because you gotta take care of a wife and kids and life and all of that stuff.
Right. So you've been involved in quite a few things. The Cleveland Play House FusionFest, the things that you've done at Cleveland Public Theater, as well as Karamu and Cleveland State University. How do you see the landscape right now in terms of theatrical productions and the importance of them? Do you see us making any strides in terms of increasing the relevance of those things and the way that they can benefit and affect people? Or are you seeing us transforming into this metaverse and people putting on goggles and stuff to experience art?
I absolutely don't know. Because of COVID has thrown a question mark over everything. I mean, it really has. I mean, I'm just amazed by the amount of artists that we've lost. People that have left theater because, you know, there aren't as many avenues for advancement and aren't as many stages to perform on. So I don't know what this thing is going to look like when it all settles back down. I'm as curious as anyone. I really am.
Well, you know, just looking at the circumstances, I mean, Terrence Spivey resorted to shooting a short film, and he's gotten a lot of buzz about it and gotten a lot of mileage out of it. But, you know, he went to that. You talked about, you know, doing the filmmaking thing. And, you know, we're so used to going on Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all these other electronic media, you know, but the theatrical experience is a much different experience. You know, there's a difference between sitting in a theater and using your imagination to give life to what's on stage and the illusion that that's actually a living room in a house that you're seeing these two people have this conversation, you know, or you put on some goggles and you see some people in this virtual world and somehow you're supposed to be affected the same kind of way. You know, I don't know. I don't view that as an alternative. I just see it as, I don't want to call it an amusement, but to me, it just seems like an amusement. When I want to put my feet in a lake, I walk to the lake and stick my toes in, you know, but to put on some goggles and stick my foot in the lake.
Totally agree. I just wonder, will the audiences come back? I mean, I hope they will. But I really do wonder, will they come back? And that's the main thing, because without the audience, we're nothing.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, will they come back and force like they have. As you know, they've been real slow to come back. Even to places like Broadway, they have been hit by it. You know, it's a real concern.
Well, I think that the root of it all is the extent to which folks have been traumatized and put into this place of fear of human interaction, when in actuality it's just so human to interact with others. That's why, and this is just me personally and thinking out loud right now, I just don't think we'll get to a point where people don't want to have physical relationships with others. You know, that whole terminology, social distance, was just so injurious because they weren't really talking about social distance. They were talking about physical distance, and they're two different things. But the psychology of the term, I think, has left an impact. And then the psychology of the mask as well. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole either. But, you know, there's so many things that have changed within the past couple of years. But I do think, you know, it's just human to want to be interactive with other human beings. So I just don't think that you can replace the theater with a virtual experience.
Hey, let me tell you, from your lips to God's ear, Vince, from your lips to God's ear.
Yes.
God, I hope that's so true.
Yes.
Well, I agree with you 100%. Nothing replaces theater.
Yeah.
Nothing does.
Yep. Yeah. So as you look at things now, and I know you're dealing with the impact of you know, the virus and the pandemic and all that other kind of stuff, but you're constructing new plays now, and you're looking towards a future where you'll be pulling off theatrical productions?
Yeah, so for sure. I mean, I have a bunch of unproduced plays that are already there, and plus I'm starting to, for the first time, I have enough distance that I can write about my father. So I've been working on a piece about my dad who died of lung cancer, and I've been doing a lot of work on that piece. It's called "If My Father Doesn't Die Soon, I'm Going to Kill Him." Mm-hmm. So I've been working on that, which is sort of a comic piece about my dad. Yeah. And I've been working on a piece about the Holocaust.
Okay. And from what perspective?
There was a gentleman by the name of Hilarious Gilgis, who was a African American, well, not African American, but an Afro-German artist who was murdered by the SS in 1933 because of his communist sensibilities and the fact that he was opposing the fascist government of Adolf Hitler. You know, Adolf Hitler essentially was appointed as the Chancellor of Germany by the President of Germany, Hindenburg, in 1933. And also in 1933, he outlawed all political parties that were not the Nazi Party. He made the Nazi Party the only party. And then he also announced the Third Reich and became the sole dictator of Germany. And that all happened in 1933, which was the year that they murdered Hilarious Gilgis. And so the piece is about Hilarious Gilgis. A lot of people just don't see Africans in that European space, but we were there too. And not only were we there, we were the targets of the Nazis, just like the Jewish population there in Germany.
Wow, that's fascinating. We're running out of time, but I just had an observation, and that is folks like you, folks like Terrence Spivey, Ife Gail Young, you've been very intentional about creating content that includes stories about African Americans or Black folks. Is there a certain intentionality for you with respect to that as well? Briefly.
Well, I'm a huge history nerd, and I am in many, many ways a child of Terrence Spivey. I mean, I learned underneath his breast, so I take a lot of his tendencies as well. You know, so he's a person that took some of my inclination towards history and really supercharged them, and sort of allowed me to put that on the stage.
Well, I have to tell you, Michael, you have a great role model there, someone that is definitely worthy of emulation. I look at the work that he's doing now. He just finished a production down south. Kudos to you and kudos to him for doing all that you do for theater and telling the story of Black people. Thank you for being my guest on Open Door.
Without Terrence Spivey, I wouldn't be here.
Yes. I hear that, and I fully accept it. But again, thank you for joining me on Open Door.
Thanks for having me, Vince.
All right, and thank you for listening. Know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, make today your best day. Peace.